Hey guys, I'm Jordy, and this is your guide to the Season of Discovery version of Blackwing Lair. Now, BWL in SOD features this conspicuous NPC at the start of the instance named Victor Nefarian that allows you to enable or disable 5 different trials that alter how you'll need to play in various ways. We don't know specifically how these trials are going to adjust what loot drops from the instance, or whether the trials will rotate week to week with what's available, so we'll just quickly go over what each one is and how to adjust. First, the red trial. When in combat, you have a chance to get a debuff on you called Blazing Wounds that does 400 fire damage every 3 seconds and will stack with itself over time until you've been directly healed over 90% HP. This one's not too bad, but if things do start to go awry, these will quickly overwhelm you. Next, the blue trial, which puts a blue debuff on you that telegraphs a giant circle that once the debuff expires will explode, dealing a big amount of arcane damage split between anyone else also in the circle. So this is a stack mechanic, soak it when you see someone with a circle and then respread. Next up, the green trial. This one's kind of the opposite of blue. When in combat, random players will get a big green circle around them that once the debuff expires will drop a big cloud of poison on the ground. If this is on you, run out of the raid, drop off the poison in a safe place, and then return to where you were. Alright, we're almost done. We're on to the bronze. This one speeds up and slows down your movement speed seemingly at random when you're in BWL, regardless of combat. This one can hurt you as much as it can help, but it's super fun. Now, for the purpose of this guide, I'm going to assume you're using the black trial because it's the one that enables the true hard modes for the raid, and it adjusts things case by case per fight, so we'll just discuss it as we get there. As far as raid composition, you're looking at bringing 3 tanks, 1 being a flex tank for certain fights, as well as 4 to 5 healers. I'd probably bring 5 for prog to help protect your world bus early on, but I'm sure you'll drop to 4 pretty quickly. Okay, first up, Razorgore. Start on the left here and rush the orb, killing the orcs up top and interrupting, while your main tank quickly right-clicks the orb and starts to destroy the eggs using the 4th button on your pet bar. Don't worry too much about the other spells, they're nice but aren't necessary. One thing to note, if for some reason the Razorgore pilot gets interrupted from channeling the mind control, they get a debuff that prevents them from doing it again, so make sure you manage it well and have a backup if necessary. If you're using the blue or green trial, that pilot is a possible target for those effects, so be mindful of it and stack on them or tell them to move if necessary and use your backup. Okay, so we spread out the raid around the room, working to clear the adds as they spawn and interrupting casters. We put 1 melee group on the right side of the room and 1 on the left, with ranged and healers loosely spread in the center, turning and turreting. About 2 minutes into the fight, or once 10 eggs have been popped, the unstable chromatic drake will spawn from the big egg at the center of the room. Your off tank should pick it up and take it to one side of the room while your DPS start working on it while managing the adds that continue to spawn. You might put melee DPS on the Drake while ranged focus on the adds, whatever works for you. It's possible to off tank this and not kill it, but you should have plenty of time. It does a bunch of random elemental stuff, lines of fire on the ground, temporal acceleration on the ground that if you stand in increases your movement speed by 50%, and melee ranged and cast speed by 100%, as well as some other ground effects that we're looking to avoid. Okay, so we take out the Drake. Now, there might be some sweaty strategy to keep this alive to take advantage of the temporals for phase 2, but for now, we kill it and our Razorgore pilot is almost done. Whoever is piloting Razorgore, as the last egg is popped, gets nearly infinite threat, so make sure it's your main tank and drag him to the position down here. Face him away from the raid with your off tank on his flank and have everyone in the raid pop a free action potion and blast. Eventually the tank is going to get conflagged, your off tank should be building big threat and take him down. Great job. Okay, so now on to Vaelastrasz. Vael, with the black trial, now has 60% HP, which means you've got more fight to fight. So this is one of a few fights in here I'd recommend you plan for 3 tanks. On pull, Vael applies Essence of the Red to everybody in the room, which restores 500 mana, 50 energy, and 20 rage per second. Additionally, about 15 seconds into the fight, he'll apply 3 stacks of burning adrenaline to his current target, ideally the tank, that stacks 1 stack per second. This increases damage and haste by 10% per stack, as well as deals 1% of max HP as damage every 2 seconds per stack. If you stand anywhere near this person when they die, they will explode on you, likely killing you. Additionally, he'll apply this to other random players over the course of the fight, not just casters, so you need to watch your debuffs and run out of the raid at around 15 or 20 stacks, or you will likely blow up and kill everyone around you. Okay, so this is slightly different than old BWL, as burning adrenaline doesn't outright kill you upon expiration, but it is still super dangerous. What you're looking to do is have your 3 tanks building threat, 2 to the side, while your main tank goes ham, and then around 20 stacks, a second tank moves into position, taunts, and the main tank runs out. This goes for everybody in the raid. At 15 or 20 stacks, move out so you don't explode. One thing you can do here is pop a Flask of Petrification just before you explode, freezing in place but also making you invulnerable so that you soak the damage. You are now stuck in Flask of Petrification for 1 minute, so just sit tight and wait for the boss to die. If you do this, you don't even need to move out of the group, just pop it and sit tight as the rest of the raid finishes it for you. Now you need some big DPS here. It will get much easier once your raid's outfitted in BWL gear, but early on, this one will be a challenge. Alright, moving on from here, we enter the Suppression Room and eventually Broodlord Lash Lair. Now this Suppression Room's gotten a bit of an upgrade, and we're looking at a few of the traps zapping out lightning. So instead of hugging one side, we'll be going down the middle, avoiding the zapping traps and disarming the other ones as usual. Moving up to this upper tier. From here, we muster as usual, and then all move into the far side corner where we'll tank Broodlord. Now, Broodlord isn't much different in the first 50%, just watch the knockback that you aren't sent into the lightning traps, and watch your threat as the tanks get really trucked here. And then at 50%, he'll teleport to the back of the room and start AoEing the raid, knocking the raid back and often into traps. You're going to want your tank to quickly get to the boss, as he'll continue the AoE damage until someone gets in melee range. We rush to the back of the room to re-engage him, but be careful because he will hit whoever is in melee range first and won't move, so tanks don't try to drag him, just tank him and blow him up. Alright, Broodlord down, good luck on Maladath, and we move on to Firemaw. Now Firemaw's gotten a bit of a voltage upgrade since we last spoke to him, and now mixes electricity with his fire attacks. First, as usual, make sure your tanks at least have a Nixia skill cloak on, but I'd recommend everyone use one just in case. The extra DPS won't be necessary, and you'll be glad you had it on the off chance of a random breath on the raid. Tanks need to face their backs against the wall here while the range stay out of the room, because positioning is very specific here. Every few seconds, Firemaw will cast Flame Buffet, applying a debuff to anyone in line of sight, dealing fire damage and increasing their fire damage taken by 150. Healers can avoid being in line of sight of the boss while still keeping the tanks in view by standing in specific spots. Just suss it out, you'll get it. Now, in addition to the Flame Buffet, every time one of these gets applied, you also get a second debuff called Static Electricity. This is a new debuff that stacks up to 10, and upon the 10th application will pulse, dealing almost 1,000 nature damage and chaining to anyone nearby. The trick here now is to run out at around 8 stacks, letting the 10th stack apply, pulsing that electricity, and then getting back on the boss. Additionally, you might have to line of sight the boss as ranged or melee to let your Flame Buffet stacks fall off, so watch what damage you're taking and the LOS when you have to. Finally, tanks, keep an eye on the boss's wing buffets. When you get knocked back, you lose threat, so make sure you keep an eye on it and be careful as your Flame Buffet stacks grow. You might need to tank while your other tank moves out, lets their stacks drop, and then moves back in. I'd recommend 315 fire resist here, as it helps a lot with tanking. Honestly, everyone should wear some fire resist here, or pop fire protection potions at the very least. It helps a ton with the static electricity and Flame Buffet, and will probably increase your DPS because you're dealing with the debuffs less. Okay, Firemaw goes down, we clear up through all this trash and meet the pair of dragons, Ebonroc and Flamegor. Now, these guys used to be able to be pulled separately, but now they're best buds and must be fought together. There will undoubtedly be some high skill kills where you stack and cleave these guys, but we're going to do the fight as I'm sure it's intended by separating the dragons on the left and the right here because of these two spells, Brand of Flame and Brand of Shadow. Every 15 seconds, Ebonroc and Flamegor will cast this on anyone within 50 yards of them, dealing 250 fire or shadow damage and applying the associated debuff. Now this doubles the amount of damage that you take from these pulses, so the goal here is to get to 3 stacks, then swap to the other dragon, allowing your fire or shadow debuff to fall off, and then doing the same on the other side. Additionally, you're going to want a third tank here to help your tanks make the swap themselves. So tank 3 grabs one of the dragons from tank 1, while they run to taunt off of tank 2, who then does the same with tank 3, and so on. Complicating all of this are 2 additional debuffs that periodically gets applied called Stop and Go. About 25 seconds in, everyone will get hit with the stop debuff, and they have to, you guessed it, stop moving. If you move with this, you'll take 500 damage every half second, which the raid cannot afford to be taking. After 5 seconds, the debuff falls off, and you're free to move again. 20 or so seconds later, the raid will get hit with the go debuff, doing the same exact thing, but now the raid must be moving or you'll take that same amount of damage. These mechanics aren't too difficult to manage, just be careful when you're moving between dragons that you stop if you get hit with these, and make sure to move around with the go debuff if you're standing at a dragon. It's easy to tunnel your bars and not see it, so be aware. Healers, I'm talking to you. Finally, the dragons need to die at around the same time, or one will enrage, so watch your DPS and go easy on anything too far ahead. Down they go. Okay, on to Chromaggus. Now, Chromaggus on the PTR was a bit overtuned in my opinion, but it was very killable. I did some digging and found a new flag that the breaths he cast are now able to be line of sighted, but things could change upon release, so keep that in mind. We're going to assume it's going to be impossible to line of sight, but if it does change, then the fight will get considerably easier. Now, Chromaggus has had a bit of a facelift since the original BWL and seemingly also forgot some of his old mechanics, so don't worry about dispelling or cleansing. We're really only concerned about a few things here. First, he still frenzies, so you'll need a hunter to trank him occasionally. Additionally, Chromaggus will be vulnerable to a specific school of magic every so often and take reduced damage from anything else, so have a mage cast Detect Magic on him to see which is up and use different spells accordingly. Now, most importantly, around 75, 50, and 25% HP, and this is not exact, he'll cast a series of breaths at random, but will always cast all 4. Frostburn, Ignite Flesh, Corrosive Acid, and Time Lapse. Ignite Flesh is a simple dot. Corrosive Acid is also a dot and removes some armor. It's really only relevant for your current tank. And the big ones, Frostburn and Time Lapse. Frostburn really hurts and drains mana, so healers bring extra potions in case you need it. And then finally, Time Lapse, a stun that halves your HP, but is removable with a Sands of Time, items that drop from trash in the instance. It's imperative that your tank pops one of these whenever the stun goes out so that they don't get one shot by the boss. Healers should also consider these too. They're sorely needed during the window to keep the raid up. Okay, so this is a ton of raid damage. We're going to line up raid-wide damage mitigating cooldowns like Powered Barrier on the raid during this series of breaths, as well as have a warrior cast Rallying Cry, increasing the raid's HP by a good margin. These 2 defensive cooldowns should get you through the breathy onslaught and allows you to keep pumping without too much trouble. Just make sure people pop defensives, Hellstones if they get low, anything to help mitigate damage taken and help your healers out. Okay, so that's the breaths. The only other big mechanic is the roll over. At about 50% HP, Nefarian will command Chromaggus to roll over, and after some coaxing, he finally does. But in doing so, shakes the foundations of the room and causes meteors to come sailing towards the raid. During this, you'll want to spread out and avoid getting hit. You can't risk a stack here and taking one to the face. Alright, Chromaggus goes down, and now we're on the man himself. Now, Nefarian isn't too bad. Just make sure the raid is all wearing their Onyxia scale cloaks ahead of time, as he'll still cast Shadow Flame on the entire room unless you forgot yours and want to run behind the throne. Split the raid up into 2 and tackle the spawning Draconids, and try to keep them clustered because they'll be back later in the fight. When Nefarian announces that he's entering the battle, have your tank run to meet him and group up to blast. We recommend mages being back here away from the raid, as he'll still do various class calls every so often that will screw up the raid. The sheep is especially annoying. Hunters, bring an extra ranged weapon to avoid breaking. Priests, watch your heals during yours. Handle the infernals when they spawn for warlocks, the usual stuff. In addition to the normal class call stuff, Nefarian will throw shadow-imbued weapons associated with the class that he calls out that do various things. Paladins have weapons that consecrate, warriors two-handers that whirlwind, priests staves that cast mind flay, warlocks AoE death coil, druids root, mages arcane explosion. These aren't too dangerous, just watch out where you're standing and move away from anything that looks spooky. And make sure you assign a mage or druid to decurse the main tank. He'll get debuffed with the curse Veil of Shadow that reduces healing taken by 75%. Super deadly on your main tank, so watch for it. He'll still fear, so fear ward the tank, and as usual, at around 20%, he'll resurrect the Draconid corpses into big skeletons, so have a tank AoE taunt and blast them before they screw up your raid too much. and down the man goes. Congratulations on your win, and enjoy your loot. Now, before I go, I'll be putting out a big assignment sheet for Blackwing Lair that covers all the assignments your raid will need, including a handy raid helper autofill feature that will quickly input your raiders into the sheet if you do use it. It's up over on my Patreon, so check it out. I'll have a video covering it coming tomorrow. And that's it for Blackwing Lair. Like I said, TBD on any final tuning that they do between now and the raid's real launch. If anything changes, I'll make sure to update you in the description of the video. If you enjoyed this and want to see more guides for SOD and Classic WoW in the future, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps me a bunch, and I super appreciate it. And I want to give a big shout out to Kagger and the guys from Resist. Thanks for the footage. Now, go enjoy Blackwing Lair. I know I will, and I'll see you in the next one.